At dawn, a solitary woman finds an injured man near the fence that separates the forest from the village. Without saying a word, she takes him to her shed and treats his wounds. But when the villagers discover this, they accuse her of betrayal. The crowd arms itself and tension grows. Watch until the end and discover why a gesture of care became a symbol of courage. Subscribe to the channel to follow this true story of resistance. The Amazon jungle was dense that swelteringly hot afternoon, with hanging vines and the incessant buzzing of insects cutting through the humid air. The APACHE River flowed lazily, a few meters away, reflecting the golden sun that was beginning to bid farewell. Among the thick foliage, a body collapsed in silence. Kawa, a Munduruku warrior with broad shoulders and hands calloused by daily struggle, felt the steel cut deep into his leg when he stepped into the trap left by invaders. It wasn't a hunting trap, but a vigilance one made to hurt, to mark territory where there should be no boundaries. Blood flowed abundantly, staining the body paintings that told the story of his people. Without strength, he dragged himself to the edge between forest and open field, where an improvised fence marked the division between the world that breathed freely and the one that suffocated under chains of paper and property. It was there, with the damp earth absorbing his blood like a silent witness, that he lost consciousness, while the wind whispered ancient prayers in the leaves of the trees. Dona Jurema was not known for her hospitality in the small village of Igarapé das Flores. She lived alone in a simple wooden and straw hut on the outskirts of the settlement, where the chickens loose in the yard and the always half-closed windows made her the target of whispers and suspicious glances. Some called her a witch, others a jaguar woman. There were those who said she spoke with the dead or that she was cursed for living without a man. She never bothered to respond. In her 50s, she had learned that silence was the armor of the rejected. Her brown skin, wrinkled by the sun and marked by time, carried the stories that no one was interested in hearing. In her yard, medicinal, herbs grew in abundance: cat's claw, copaiba, andiroba, each with its purpose, each with its spirit. Those who sought her out always came at nightfall, hidden, ashamed of needing the knowledge of one they publicly despised. That March morning, when dew still covered the leaves of the banana trees surrounding her hut, Dona Jurema went out to collect eggs from the chicken coop when she saw a human form fallen by the fence that marked the boundary of her land. Her first instinct was to retreat, to protect herself. But she soon realized that the man was still breathing, even if weakly. The body, tattooed with indigenous designs, was covered in mud and blood, the leg severely injured by some type of trap. She didn't call anyone. Years of living there had taught her that certain decisions didn't need witnesses. With considerable effort for her body already tired by the years, she lifted the man by the shoulders and dragged him to the shed at the back of her house, where she kept dried herbs and tools. The smell of blood attracted Manduka, the tortoise, that had lived in the yard longer than she herself, an ancestral animal that walked slowly among the plants like a silent guardian. He seemed to watch with curiosity as she carefully cut the man's pants to examine the wound. "It's going to take more than prayer, my son," she murmured to herself as she heated water on the wood stove. It wasn't the first time she had treated wounds like this. In the clay basin, she mixed warm water with copaiba leaves and andiroba bark. She washed the deep cut, removing debris and soil. Her fingers worked with the precision of someone who knew each muscle, each vein, as if she could see through the skin. The trap had cut deep but hadn't reached the bone. With thread and needle sterilized in the fire, she made firm stitches, humming softly a song her grandmother had taught her, words in an ancient dialect that few still understood. As she worked, the man briefly awoke. His eyes, dark as acai, seeds fixed on her without fear, without distrust. Just an exchange of glances that dispensed with words. She offered water in a gourd. He drank with difficulty and fell back asleep. Night came quickly, as it always did in the Amazon. Dona Jurema remained by the man's side, changing the herb compresses, offering water when he momentarily awakened. At some point, she fell asleep sitting on the wooden stool. She woke with a start to a noise at the door. It was Toninho, her 9-year-old. great-nephew who came to bring milk and flour as he did 3 times a week. "Grandma Jurema, I brought the things that Mother sent," said the boy, entering without ceremony. He stopped immediately upon seeing the man lying on the improvised cot. His eyes widened, mixing fear and fascination. "Who is he, Grandma?" Jurema hesitated. Tonino was the son of her niece Maria, the only one who still maintained some contact with her. The boy had the innocence that only children preserve, without the prejudices that adults insist on carrying. "He's a son of the forest, Tonino. He's hurt and needs help," she finally replied, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder. "You can't tell anyone, understand? Not even your mother. It's our secret." Tonino nodded, approaching slowly. He observed the tattoos on the man's body with curiosity. "Is he a real Indian, like in school books?" "He is Munduruku, a warrior. People who have protected the forest for longer than this village has existed," explained Jurema, feeling a pang of pride at being able to share that knowledge. "The designs on his body tell the story of his life, of the struggles he has faced." The boy moved closer, fascinated. "Can I help take care of him?" he asked with the spontaneous generosity that only children possess. Jurema smiled, perhaps for the first time in many days. "Yes, you can, but it has to be our secret. The village people don't understand the children of the forest. They fear what they don't know." The man woke again, more lucid this time. He looked intently at the boy, then at Jurema. He made a gesture with his hand, pointing to himself. "Kawa," he said in a hoarse voice. Jurema nodded. "I am Jurema. This is Tonino." A simple introduction, without ceremony, in that shed that smelled of dried herbs and blood. That night was long. Kawa developed a fever, his body fighting the eye infection that threatened to set in. Jurema prepared a tea of quinine and lemongrass, forcing him to drink small sips. Tonino stayed until later, helping to change the cold compresses on the warrior's forehead. When the boy had to leave, he promised to return the next day with more supplies. "Bring honey," Jurema asked, "and don't tell anyone." The dawn was tea, ending when Kawa finally stabilized. His breathing became more regular, his skin less hot. Jurema, exhausted, fell asleep sitting on the dirt floor, leaning against the wooden wall. She woke with the first rays of sun and was startled to see that the cot was empty. For a moment, she thought it had all been a strange dream, one of those that seem more real than reality itself. But the bloodstains on the cloth and the used herbs confirmed the truth. She hurried out to the yard and saw him there, standing, with difficulty, leaning on a piece of wood he had improvised as a crutch. He was looking at the horizon beyond the fence where the forest began. "You shouldn't be standing," she said, approaching. He turned slowly. His eyes held a silent gratitude that needed no words. "My people," he said simply, pointing to the forest. "I need to return." Jurema felt a tightness in her chest that she couldn't explain. "Your wound hasn't healed properly yet. You need more time." He shook his head. "Invaders, loggers, they're getting closer to the village. I need to warn them." The determination in his voice was undeniable. Jurema understood that nothing she said would change his mind. She went into the house and returned with a small package of leaves. "Take this. They're herbs for the wound. Change the dressing twice a day." He took the package, his fingers briefly brushing hers. In that fleeting touch there was more gratitude than in 1,000 words. "I will return," he said simply. And limping, supported by his improvised crutch, he disappeared among the trees of the forest, leaving only the trail of crushed leaves where he had passed. Donna Jurema stood watching for a long time, even after his silhouette had completely disappeared. Something told her this wasn't the end of the story, just the beginning of something bigger than she herself couldn't understand. Upon returning inside, she found Manduka, the old tortoise, standing at the door, as if also observing the departure of the unexpected visitor. "Well, my old one," she murmured to the animal, "I think we've stirred up a hornet's nest." And she didn't know how right she was in that prediction. That same morning, Mr. Afonso, the neighbor who raised cattle on the land next door, passed by the back fence and saw the bloodstains on the vegetation. How a naturally suspicious man, he followed the trail to near Donna Jurema's shed, but didn't have the courage to enter her property. That was enough for tongues to start wagging in the small village of Igarape das Flores. The news spread as swiftly as floodwater. At Mr. Januario's store, the nerve center of Igarape das Flores, the murmuring began even before noon. "The swamp witch helped an Indian," said Mr. Afonso between sips of cachaça, repeating the story to whoever would listen. "I saw the blood. With my own eyes, saw the trail going straight to her yard." The men gathered at the counter exchanged meaningful glances. In recent months, tension between the residents and the indigenous people of the region had increased considerably. The Progress Logging Company, which had settled nearby less than a year ago, employed half the men in the village and had plans to expand its extraction area. The manager, Augusto Mendonça, a middle-aged man from Belém, made no secret of his irritation with the presence of the Munduruku, whom he classified as an obstacle to development. "An obstacle that has to be removed," he used to say, through gritted teeth when the subject came up. That afternoon, when the story reached Augusto's ears, he was supervising the loading of logs. His face, normally impassive, wrinkled in an expression of displeasure. "Who is this woman?" he asked the foreman, Zé Claudio, who had brought the news. "She's the healer, Mr. Augusto, lives alone in a hut near the border with the indigenous area. They say she's kind of a witch, makes medicines with herbs, that kind of thing." Augusto scratched his chin thoughtfully. "And the Indian? Do they know who he was?" Zé Claudio shrugged. "Seems he was injured. Mr. Afonso saw blood. But nobody saw the native." "I want to know more about this," Augusto finally said. "It could be one of those who have been creating problems for our operation. Keep an eye on that woman." At the small municipal school in Igarape das Flores, Toninho could barely concentrate on his math class. His thoughts flew to his grandmother's shed, to the tattooed man and his deep gaze. He had never seen an indigenous person so close up, only in the illustrations of school books that portrayed generic figures with headdresses and loincloths. Kawa was different, real, with stories engraved on his skin. When the bell rang announcing the end of classes, the boy ran outside, eager to fulfill his promise to bring honey to his grandmother. On the way, he was intercepted by Pedrinho and two other older boys. "Hey, witch's son, we heard your grandmother is hiding a wild Indian," Pedrinho taunted, blocking his path. Toninho felt his stomach sink. How could they know? "I don't know what you're talking about," he answered, trying to pass. "My grandmother lives alone. Liar, my father saw blood near her house." "Your Indian must have killed someone," Pedrinho insisted, pushing Toninho, who fell to the dirt ground. The other boys laughed. "Be careful, Pedrinho," said one of them. "He might put a curse on you. His grandmother is a witch, remember?" Toninho got up, his eyes burning with held-back tears. "Leave my grandmother alone. She didn't do anything wrong." The boys laughed even more. "Defending Indians is treason. My father says they're lazy and don't want the city to grow," said Pedrinho, repeating what he had certainly heard at home. "They protect the forest that you're destroying," shouted Toninho, surprised by his own courage. A momentary silence fell. Then Pedrinho advanced threateningly, but an adult voice interrupted the scene. "What's going on here?" It was Father Joaquim, a man in his 60s with graying hair and an accent that betrayed his origins from Minas Gerais. Despite having been in the region for only 2 years, he had earned the respect of most residents for his direct and sincere way of speaking. "Nothing, Father," Pedrinho replied, backing away. "We were just talking." The religious man looked from one to the other, his eyes resting on Toninho, who still had a face red with anger and shame. "Talking, is it? It looked more like an ambush. Go home, all of you." The older boys quickly moved away. Father Joaquim placed his hand on Toninho's shoulder. "Is everything all right, my son?" The boy nodded, still trembling slightly. "They were saying things about my grandmother, Father, things that aren't true." The priest sighed. He knew well the rumors circulating about Donna Jurema. Although he had never visited her house, he respected the knowledge she had about medicinal plants. More than once he had defended her work when some of the more conservative parishioners suggested that her practices were the devil's work. People fear what they don't understand, Tonino. Your grandmother has a special gift of healing, and that frightens those who only know one way of seeing the world. They walked together to the small store where the priest bought a piece of rapadura, hardened sugarcane juice, for the boy. What else are they saying about your grandmother? Tonino hesitated, the secret weighing on his conscience. But something in the priest's gaze inspired confidence. They're saying she helped an injured Indian, father, as if that were something bad. The priest was silent for a moment, pondering. And did she help? The boy looked away. I don't know. You don't need to tell me, Tonino, but know that helping someone who is injured, whoever they may be, is never wrong in the eyes of God. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan. He gently squeezed the boy's shoulder. Tell your grandmother that if she needs anything, she can look for me. When Tonino finally arrived at Donna Jurema's house, he found her in the yard, gathering herbs with a worried expression. Grandma, I brought the honey you asked for, he said, handing her a small glass jar. And I also brought this. He held out a package wrapped in newspaper. It's a piece of dried meat that Mother sent. Jurema looked at her grandson with affection. Thank you, my son. She immediately noticed that something was bothering him. What happened? You were late. Tonino told her about the encounter with the boys and the conversation with the priest. As he spoke, Jurema's face became more serious. So they already know, she murmured, more to herself than to her grandson. Know what, Grandma? About the man I helped, Kawan. She sighed deeply. This is not good, Tonino, not good at all. She took her grandson inside the house and served him a cup of kupwatu juice while considering what to do. Father Joachim said you can look for him if you need help, the boy commented between sips. Jurema sketched a tired smile. The priest is a good man, but there are limits to what he can do. The afternoon was already falling when they heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Jurema went to the window and saw 2 pickup trucks stopping in front of her house. From one of them descended Augusto Mendonça, accompanied by Zé Claudio and 3 other men. From the other vehicle came Mr. Afonso and some more villagers. Stay inside, she ordered Tonino, her voice suddenly and strangely calm. She went out to the yard, straightening her shoulders, despite the fear she was beginning to feel. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How can I help you? Augusto stepped forward, and the artificial smile on his thin lips. Donna Jurema, isn't it? I've heard a lot about you. I'm Augusto Mendonça, manager of Progress Logging Company. He extended his hand, which she did not accept. He cleared his throat, embarrassed, and continued. We've come to talk about a guest you had recently. Jurema's heart accelerated, but her face remained impassive. I don't know what you're talking about. I live alone. Mr. Afonso advanced, pointing his finger. I saw the blood, Jurema. I saw the trail coming from the forest to your house. It was an Indian, wasn't it? The other men murmured in agreement. Augusto made an appeasing gesture. Donna Jurema, we understand that you wanted to help someone who was injured. It's a Christian attitude, but we need to know who this man was and what he was doing on the logging company's land. The land where I found him is not the logging company's, Jurema replied, her voice firm. It's mine by right of possession for more than 30 years. Augusto smiled again, condescendingly. The legal boundaries are being reviewed, ma'am. And the issue here is not property, but security. We've been having problems with indigenous people sabotaging our equipment, threatening our employees. If you're harboring one of them... I'm not harboring anyone, Jurema interrupted. The man is already gone. A murmur ran through the group. And where did he go? Augusto insisted, the smile now completely gone. Back to his people, I imagine. She looked directly into his eyes. I didn't ask, and he didn't say. Augusto exchanged glances with Zé Claudio. Donna Jurema, you need to understand your position. This community lives from the work we offer. The Indians are an obstacle to progress. Helping them is, well, it's a kind of betrayal. Jurema felt a cold anger take over her body. Betrayal? Helping an injured human being is betrayal? In what world do you live, Mr. Augusto? In the real world, ma'am, where we need jobs and development. He took a step closer. The Munduruku are in our way, and those who help them are also in the way. The threat was as clear as water. The other men moved, forming a semicircle around her. At that moment, the door of the house opened and Tonino ran out, placing himself beside his grandmother. "Leave my grandmother alone. She didn't do anything wrong." "Tonino, I told you to stay inside," Jurema reprimanded, trying to push him. Behind her, Augusto looked at the boy with renewed interest. "This is your grandson, Donna Jurema. How nice to meet him." His falsely friendly tone made Jurema feel a shiver. "The boy has nothing to do with this," she said. "He's already leaving." "Actually," continued Augusto, "this reminds me that we have an opening for an apprentice at the sawmill. A smart boy like him could earn good money. Of course, that would depend on his family being aligned with the community's interests." Jurema pulled Tonino closer. "My grandson doesn't need a job. He has school." "For now, yes," agreed Augusto. "But things change, don't they?" He turned to the other men. "Let's go, gentlemen. I think Donna Jurema understood our message." They began to withdraw, but Augusto stopped and turned one last time. "Oh, I almost forgot. We're expanding the operation. We'll need this area within a week. I have the documents that prove our right." He took a folded paper from his pocket and held it out. "You have that deadline to collect your belongings and move." Jurema did not take the paper, which fell to the ground. "This land is mine. I have the papers from my late husband." "Old documents, Donna Jurema." "Things have changed. The company bought the rights legally. 7 days, that's enough time." And with that, he left with the other men, leaving only a cloud of red dust and a heavy silence. When the vehicles moved away, Jurema finally let her body tremble. 7 days. That was the deadline they had given her to leave the only home she had known for the last 3 decades, the place where she had planted every fruit tree, where she knew every inch of land, where the memories of an entire lifetime were buried along with her husband's bones. "Grandma, what are we going to do?" asked Tonino, his voice trembling. Jurema hugged her grandson tightly. "I don't know, my child, I don't know." But she knew she wouldn't yield without a fight. That land was more than a piece of ground. It was her identity, her history. And the forest beyond the fence, which was now also threatened, was part of the same living body to which she belonged. Manduka, the old tortoise, approached slowly, as if sensing his owner's distress. Jurema bent down and caressed his shell. "Even you will need to find a new home, my old one." She looked to the horizon, in the direction where Kawa had disappeared among the trees. 7 days, the ultimatum was given. And time, as always, ran faster when it was most needed. 5 days had passed since the ultimatum. Donna Jurema watched the dawn from her yard, as she had done thousands of times before, but now with the pain of someone who knows that moments are counted. The small leather suitcase that had belonged to her husband was already partially filled with the few clothes and personal items she would be able to take. The medicinal herbs, carefully dried and stored in glass jars, were wrapped in banana leaves and stored in straw baskets. But how to take the land? How to carry the song of the birds that woke her every morning? How to pack the shade of the mango tree where her husband used to rest on hot afternoons? Tonino had spent the last few days helping his grandmother, coming straight from school to the hut. His mother, Maria, at first reluctant to get involved, had finally yielded upon realizing the gravity of the situation. "You can come live with us, Donna Jurema," she had offered the day before, standing uncomfortably at the door of the house. "Our shack is small, but we'll make do." Jurema had thanked her with a nod, but both knew that wasn't a real solution. Maria worked as a domestic servant in the house of one of the logging company's supervisors. Taking in Jurema would put her own livelihood at risk. That morning, the 5th day, Jurema made a decision. She wouldn't ask for help from anyone in the village, but there was one person who might at least listen to her story. She put on her only good dress, a faded blue outfit with long sleeves, tied a scarf on her head, and set out toward the small church of St. Francis in the center of Igarapé das Flores. She arrived during the morning mass. She stayed at the back, almost hidden, feeling the gazes of the few faithful present. When the service ended, she waited for everyone to leave before approaching the altar, where Father Joaquim was arranging the liturgical objects. "Father," she called in a low voice. He turned, surprised. "Dona Jurema, what a joy to see you in our church." His smile was genuine, without the fear or contempt she usually saw on the faces of the other residents. "What brings you here?" Jurema hesitated, her hands nervously squeezing the scarf. "I need advice, Father. They're evicting me from my land." In a few words, she told him about Augusto Mendonça's visit and the ultimatum. She also spoke about Kawa, the Munduruku warrior she had helped. The priest listened in silence, his face becoming more serious with each word. When she finished, he sighed deeply. "I've heard rumors about this, but I didn't imagine they would go so far. The logging company has been buying or taking land from many small owners. They say they have documents, but..." He left the sentence, hanging in the air, his gaze getting lost in the images of saints on the simple walls. "Do you think I can fight?" asked Jurema. "I have the papers my husband left. The land has been ours for more than 30 years. Father Joaquim sat on one of the church benches, inviting her to do the same. "Dona Jurema, you know there are laws, but there's also power. Progress Logging Company has lawyers, has money, has influence even in the capital. I could recommend a lawyer in Santarém, but I fear the process would take much longer than the 2 days you have left." Jurema lowered her eyes. It was confirmation of what she already knew. "I understand, Father. But," he continued, "there is something we can do. The church can offer temporary shelter. We have a small house in the back where missionaries stay when they visit the region. You could stay there while we seek a legal solution." It was more than Jurema had expected. You would do that for me? Even knowing I helped an Indian?" The priest smiled. "Especially for that, Dona Jurema. What you did for the least of my brothers, you did for me," said Jesus. "You acted as a true Christian." For the first time in days, Jurema felt a spark of hope, but soon a thought worried her. "And Manduka, my tortoise, he wouldn't survive in a small place." "We'll bring him too," assured the priest. "The house's yard is small but sufficient." When Jurema left the church, the weight on her heart was a little lighter. She had 2 days to organize the move. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was a chance to start over without completely losing her dignity. On her way back, she passed by Mr. Januario's store to buy some flour. The place was full, as always happened in the morning. When she entered, the conversations abruptly ceased. She felt the gazes upon her, some curious, others hostile. Mr. Januario, a fat man with a red face, served her with evident discomfort. "Half a kilo of flour, please," she requested, placing some coins on the counter. While the shopkeeper was weighing the flour, she heard a voice behind her. "So the witch still has the courage to appear in the village?" It was Mr. Afonso, the neighbor who had denounced her. Jurema didn't turn around. "I just came to buy flour, Afonso. I don't want trouble. Trouble is what you brought to us when you helped that Indian," he continued, his voice altered by the morning cachaça. "Because of people like you, they become more and more daring. Just yesterday, they attacked a team from the logging company. They broke an expensive chainsaw." Now Jurema turned. "The Munduruku are defending their land, Afonso, land that was there long before any of us arrived." Some men approached, forming a threatening semicircle. "Indian land?" said one of them, spitting on the ground. "They don't even know what to do with it. We bring progress, jobs." "You bring destruction," retorted Jurema, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "You cut down century-old trees for what? To enrich people like Augusto Mendonça, who isn't even from here. And when you're done with the forest, you'll leave, and what will be left for us? Bare land, polluted river." A tense silence fell over the store. Mr. Januario intervened, nervous. "This isn't the place for this kind of conversation. Dona Jurema, your flour is ready." He handed her a package wrapped in newspaper. She took the flour and headed for the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. In 2 days I'll leave my house. I hope you're satisfied. But remember, what you do to the forest, you do to yourselves. The river you poison is the same one you drink from." And she left, leaving behind a silence as heavy as the sky before a storm. When she arrived home, she found Tonino sitting on the porch, his face marked by recent tears. "What's wrong, my son?" she asked, alarmed. The boy raised his face. He had a cut on his lip and a bruise beginning to form on his cheek. "It was Pedrinho and the others, Grandma. They got me after school. They said my family is traitorous, that we help wild Indians against our own people." Jurema felt her blood boil. She hugged her grandson tightly. "You're not a traitor to anyone, Tonino. You have a good heart, like your grandfather had." She took him inside and cleaned the wound, with water and herbs. While she cared for her grandson, she told him about the conversation with the priest and the temporary shelter he had offered. Tonino listened in silence, his eyes still bright with contained tears. "Will we be able to return someday, Grandma?" he finally asked. Jurema hesitated. She wanted to promise that yes, they would fight and recover their piece of land, but she couldn't lie to the boy. "I don't know, my child, but we'll try." That night, while Tonino slept on the improvised cot, Jurema sat on the porch looking at the stars that dotted the Amazonian sky. The old tortoise Manduca was by her side, motionless as an ancestral stone. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from the edge of the forest. She stood up, alert. For a moment, she thought it might be Kawa returning as he had promised, but what she saw paralyzed her. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, advancing silently toward her house. It wasn't Kawan or other Munduruku. They were white men dressed in dark clothes and carrying what appeared to be unlit torches and fuel cans. They entered the yard without worrying about hiding their presence. Jurema recognized Zé Claudio, the logging company's foreman, accompanied by 2 men she didn't know. She quickly went inside, locked the door, and woke Tonino. "Grab your things, quick," she whispered. "We have to leave through the back." "What is it, Grandma?" asked the boy, frightened. "Men from the logging company. I think they came earlier than we expected." While Tonino gathered his few belongings, Jurema took the already prepared suitcase and a basket with her most precious herbs. She heard loud knocks on the front door. "Donna Jurema, we know you're in there. We just want to talk." It was Zé. Claudio's voice. "Go away, Zé Claudio," she shouted. "I still have 2 days by the agreement with your boss." A dry laugh was the response. "Plans have changed, Donna Jurema. Mr. Augusto needs this area immediately. We've come to help with the move." Jurema understood what that help meant. She pulled Tonino by the hand, and they left through the back door, running crouched among the banana trees that surrounded the house. They hadn't reached the fence when they heard the sound of glass breaking, and soon after, the glare of fire illuminated the night. Hidden among the plants, they saw the men throwing flammable liquid on the wooden walls of the house and setting fire to it with the torches. In seconds, the flames began to consume the old structure, rising toward the sky like accusing fingers. "My house," murmured Jurema, tears running down her wrinkled face. Tonino clung to her, sobbing silently. They remained there, paralyzed by horror, as everything Jurema had built over decades turned to ashes before their eyes. The men watched the fire with satisfaction, as if watching a spectacle. "Where's the old woman and the boy?" asked one of them. "They must have fled," replied Zé Claudio. "All the better. Tomorrow the machines can already enter and clear the land." They began to move away, but one of them stopped. "What if she goes to the police?" Zé Claudio laughed. "What police, man? The sheriff dines at Mr. Augusto's house every week. They'll say it was an accident, something about a candle that fell. No one will care about the story of an old half-witch." When the men finally left, Jurema and Tonino emerged from their hiding place. The house was completely engulfed by fire, the heat so intense that they couldn't approach. Everything was being lost. Her memories, her herbs, the small altar where she kept her husband's photo, the clay pots inherited from her grandmother. An entire life reduced to hungry flames that devoured wood, straw, and memories with equal voracity. "Manduca!" Tonino suddenly exclaimed. "Grandma, Manduca was in the yard." Jurema looked around, desperate. The old tortoise had disappeared. Perhaps he had managed to move away when the fire started, or perhaps she didn't want to complete the thought. "Come, my child," she said, pulling her grandson. "We can't stay here, they might come back." "Where are we going, Grandma?" Jurema looked at the dark forest, then at the path that led to the village. "To the church. Father Joaquim will take us in." They began to walk toward the village, Jurema carrying the small suitcase she had managed to save, Tonino with an improvised bundle of clothes. Behind them, the fire continued to burn, casting sparks into the starry sky like a funeral of light for everything they had lost. With each step they took, Jurema felt her heart growing heavier, not just for the material loss, but for the violence of the gesture, for the injustice that seemed to have no end. "Why did they do this, Grandma?" asked Tonino, his voice choked with crying. "Out of greed, my son, and out of fear." "Fear of what?" "Of what is different, of what they don't understand." They continued walking in silence, guided only by the light of the moon and the distant glow of the village lights. When they reached the first street, Jurema suddenly stopped. What if they see us? What if they come after us at the church? The fear was real. If the logging company men had the courage to burn her house, what else would they be capable of doing? "The father's house is behind the church," said Tonino. "We can go through the backyards without passing through the main street." It was a good plan. They then detoured, going around the houses from the back, avoiding the lit areas. When they finally reached the church, they found everything dark and silent. Jurema knocked softly on the door of the parish house, praying that the priest would be awake. After a few moments of anguish, the door opened. Father Joaquim, wearing a simple t-shirt and pants, looked at them in astonishment. "Donna Jurema, Tonino, what happened?" "They burned our house, Father," said Jurema, her voice finally breaking. "Men from the logging company. They didn't wait for the deadline." The priest's face transformed into a mask of indignation. "My God, come in quickly." He led them inside, closing and locking the door behind him. He lit a gas lamp and took them to the small kitchen in the back. "I'll prepare some tea," he said, putting water to boil. "You're safe here." While the water heated, Jurema told in detail what had happened. The priest listened, his face becoming increasingly somber. "This is criminal," he finally said. "I'll talk to the sheriff tomorrow." "It won't help, Father," replied Jurema, tired. "As Zé Claudio said, the sheriff dines at Mr. Augusto's house every week." The priest rubbed his face, frustrated. "Then, I'll go higher. I have contacts in the Diocese of Santarém. We can report to the Pastoral Land Commission, to the public ministry." "That will take time, won't it?" asked Tonino. "And meanwhile, they will have already destroyed everything." The silence that followed confirmed what everyone already knew. The system was against them. Time was against them. And now, without a house, without land, what was left? "Where is your faith, my son?" the priest finally said, placing his hand on Tonino's shoulder. "Sometimes, when everything seems lost, is when the light appears from where we least expect it." Jurema wanted to believe those words. She looked out the window, into the dark night where, in the distance, what remained of her house must still be burning. She thought of Kawa, of the determined look of the Munduruku warrior when he set off toward the forest, of the promise made with few words, "I will return." Would he return? And if he did, what could one man do against the power of the logging company, against the chainsaws, the tractors, the forged documents? "Rest tonight," said Father Joaquim, leading them to a small room at the back of the house. "Tomorrow we'll think about what to do." But as she lay on the strange bed, Jurema knew that tomorrow would bring only more pain. The forest was receding, the frontiers of greed advancing. And between the two worlds, people like her, like Tonino, like Kawa, seemed destined to lose everything they loved. The last thought before falling asleep was for Manduka, the old tortoise that had accompanied her for so many years. She imagined him slow and determined as always, dragging himself away from the fire, seeking refuge in the shadows of the forest. Perhaps, she thought, there was wisdom in that ancestral slowness. Perhaps the secret wasn't to fight directly, against the storm, but to know how to withdraw into one's own shell until it passed. And if it didn't pass? If the storm was permanent? Then all that would remain would be to move forward, one slow step after another, carrying on one's back the weight of everything that was gone. Dawn arrived with the distant sound of chainsaws. Jurema awoke in the small house behind the church, the reality of her burned house weighing on her shoulders. Toninho was still sleeping, his face finally at peace. Father Joaquim had left to seek a lawyer in Santarém, leaving them with the recommendation not to open the door to anyone. The rain began to fall around noon, drumming on the roof, when loud knocks sounded at the door. "We know you're in there," shouted Augusto Mendonça, soaked by the rain, accompanied by Zé Claudio and other men. "Open up. We need to talk." Jurema hugged Toninho, keeping silent. "It's about the Indians," insisted Augusto. "They attacked our men. We need your help. To negotiate." The healer frowned, suspicious. Why would they come to her? "Go away," she finally replied. "The father isn't here." Augusto changed his tone, feigning remorse. "What happened to your house was regrettable. I didn't authorize that. But now, the Munduruku are threatening our workers. Since you helped one of them, perhaps you can prevent bloodshed." Jurema was hesitating when she noticed a movement through the side window. Through the curtain of rain, silhouettes were approaching silently. They weren't men from the logging company. Their movements were different, fluid, in harmony with the forest even in the storm. "Toninho, look," she whispered. The boy peered through the window and his eyes widened. Munduruku warriors, with uae, bodies painted with traditional designs, were emerging from the rain, forming a semicircle around the house. At their front, a familiar figure, Kawa, completely recovered, his muscular body covered with paintings that told stories of war and protection. "Come with us, Dona Jurema," Augusto insisted, unaware of what was happening behind his back. "It's your last chance." Jurema and Kawa exchanged glances through the window, and he gave a slight nod of his head. "All right," she replied, slowly opening the door. "But my grandson stays." Augusto smiled triumphantly, but his smile died upon noticing the expression on her face. Too late he noticed the abnormal silence and turned around. His face paled upon seeing the Munduruku warriors forming a complete circle around them. Kawa stepped forward, his presence imposing despite the rain. "She saved my blood. Now she has my name," he declared in clear Portuguese, albeit with an accent. It wasn't a threat nor a plea, it was an oath of protection. Augusto tried to maintain his composure. "I have documents, I have the law on my side." Kawa smiled. "Your law is of paper, our law is of the earth. Which lasts longer?" It was then that Jurema noticed something surprising. Among the Munduruku warriors were villagers, people who worked for the logging company. A chainsaw operator stepped forward. "Mr. Augusto, we can't continue like this. I saw what they did to Dona Jurema's house. It's not right." Others spoke up, each expressing their discontent. "The river is dying," said a woman. "The fish are disappearing," added an elderly man. "My son had a fever from drinking the contaminated water," added another. Augusto was backing away, incredulous, when a new figure emerged from the rain, Father Joaquim, accompanied by a man with a protected folder. "Dr. Antonio Silveira, Federal Public Ministry," introduced the stranger. "We are investigating complaints of land grabbing, illegal deforestation, and violence against traditional communities." Augusto's face lost all color. "I have all the documents, all the licenses out," he stammered. "Documents that will be carefully analyzed," interrupted the prosecutor. "The operations of Progress Logging Company are suspended until the conclusion of the investigations." The rain was diminishing, as if nature itself recognized that a fundamental change was occurring. Kawa approached Jurema. "Healer, my people, owe you gratitude." She shook her head. "I only did what any human being should do." He smiled. "That's exactly why we owe you gratitude, for reminding us what it is to be human." 3 months later, a new house stood where Jurema's hut had once been. Built with repurposed wood and covered with straw woven by the Munduruku, it had no fences around it, just a garden of medicinal herbs that gradually merged with the forest. Children from the village and the tribe played together in the yard, while Jurema taught the young people from both communities about the plants that heal. The logging company had ended its operations after investigations that revealed fraud and environmental crimes. The former employees found new forms of subsistence, some as ecotourism guides, others as guardians of the forest, working in partnership with the Munduruku. On the porch, Jurema rested in a chair made by artisans from the village. Toninho was reading a book about medicinal plants, while Manduka, the old tortoise that had miraculously survived the fire, rested in the sun. "Grandma, do you think that one day I can be a healer like you?" asked the boy. Jurema smiled, looking at the living and resilient forest. "You already are a healer, my son. We all are, when we choose to heal instead of hurt, to unite instead of divide." In the distance, the Tapajos River flowed serenely, its waters now cleaner. Life continued its flow as it always had, but something fundamental had changed in that small corner of the Amazon. A fence had fallen, a space of separation transformed into a bridge of connection. And that, thought Jurema as she closed her eyes, was perhaps the greatest healing of all. If you were moved by this narrative about unity, respect, and protection of nature, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments how we can, like Jurema and the